The year is 1914, and conflicts between nations in Europe and abroad have been heated to the extremes. Everyone is aware that a war is coming. The only question is, when will it happen? This great conflict is rooted in Europe's long and complicated history, surrounded by the dirt of differing viewpoints, which are stained by the raging filter of nationalism. The beginning of World War I was a series of conflicts caused by treaties between European nations, which resulted in failed compromises that slowly led to war and killed off the imperialistic ideas of the past. The chain reaction of conflicts ultimately started with entangling alliances and strong nationalism in Europe. It began in Serbia, where many people were not happy with Austria-Hungary's annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. More tension arose from the heir to the Austrian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, for he believed that all Serbians were pigs, thieves, and scoundrels. Sectionalism became more prevalent as alliances began to form, and countries in informal alliances were later forced to be enemies, such as Russia and Germany. Competition between countries also created conflict. Feeling encircled by Russia and France, Germany began to build up troops on their border, which scared Russia and France and caused them to do the same. This began to form a conflict of competing armies. Many countries also showed their superiority through increased technology. The Industrial Revolution had occurred a few decades prior, leading many countries to create bigger and better weaponry. Each country competed to show they had the best navy, army, or even air force, which formed tension and eventually conflict. All of these factors were putting Europe on the edge. One of the most pressing conflicts leading to World War I, however, was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which made tensions between Serbia and Austria-Hungary worse, and accelerated the chain reaction towards war. It was June 28, 1914, and the Archduke had entered Sarajevo with his wife to direct army maneuvers in the nearby mountains. The day was bright and everything seemed normal, but a malicious group plotted in the shadows. Members of a Serbian terrorist group were strategically placed around the town to ensure the death of who they deemed a tyrant. When the Archduke first left the train station on his route to the town hall, the conspirators went into action. When the escort reached one of the conspirators, Nedeljko Kabrinović, he threw a grenade. The explosive bounced off the Archduke's car, leaving him uninjured, but the explosion severely injured several officers escorting him. Now, he had to find a new way out of town. His plan was to drive at high speeds down the Applequay Street to avoid any other attackers, but the escort made a wrong turn along the way. As the cars realized they made a wrong turn, they stopped to turn around. But Gavrilo Princip was positioned on the street. He pulled an automatic pistol out of his jacket and fired 2 rounds, one hitting the Archduke's wife, Sophia, in the abdomen, and the other hitting the Archduke near the heart, killing him almost instantly. Gavrilo Princip's actions were one of the most historical events that pushed the conflict between Serbia and Austria-Hungary closer to war. Following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary delivered a message to Serbia. At 6 o'clock on July 23, 1914, Baron Giesel von Giesingen, an Austro-Hungarian ambassador to Serbia, delivered an ultimatum to the Serbian Foreign Ministry. Under the ultimatum, Serbia was to allow them to enter its borders and investigate the assassination, for they knew the terrorists were Serbian. They were also commanded to get rid of all anti-Austrian propaganda and eliminate all terrorist organizations. In response, Serbia carefully formed a reply to Austria-Hungary. They said they would follow all commands, but they made it clear that they would not let them investigate the assassination inside their borders. Knowing how this would form a conflict, Serbia readied its troops. The ultimatum was a failed attempt at a compromise between the two empires that was the last straw before Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The conflict was amplified by the different countries' alliances with other European countries. For example, the Austro-Hungarian alliance with Germany was needed when Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, who was in an alliance with Russia. This made the conflict even worse, for Germany was automatically on the opposing side with Russia just because of their alliances. These alliances increased the conflict by pitting Europe against itself. After Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Germany and Russia attempted to form a compromise between themselves, for they were being dragged into a war they did not start. Russia's leader, Tsar Nicholas II, and Germany's leader, Kaiser Wilhelm, were cousins, so they desperately attempted to find peace, and sent several telegrams as a last attempt to compromise. They each signed their notes with the nicknames Willie and Nicky. Shortly after the declaration of war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, Tsar Nicholas sent a message to his cousin in Germany. In his telegram, he said, "In this serious moment, I appeal to you to help me. I foresee that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me and be forced to take extreme measures which will lead to war. To try and avoid such a calamity as a European war, I beg you, in the name of our old friendship, to do what you can to stop your allies from going too far. Nicky." Even before the Tsar's telegram arrived in Berlin, Kaiser Wilhelm sent his own message of compromise. In the message, he said, "I am exerting my utmost influence to induce the Austrians to deal straightly to arrive to a satisfactory understanding with you. I confidently hope that you will help me in my efforts to smooth over difficulties that may still arise. Your very sincere and devoted friend and cousin, Willie." Although the two cousins were attempting a compromise, they were too slow to act. Eventually, a series of increasingly tense telegrams broke the leaders' bond. The final telegram sent by Kaiser Wilhelm shortly before war was harshly worded. He said, "I must request you to immediately order your troops on no account to commit the slightest act of trespassing over our frontiers." Shortly after that, an ambassador from Germany to St. Petersburg delivered a declaration of war and burst into tears. The two cousins' attempt to resolve their conflict through compromise had failed. Germany formed even more conflicts within Europe as they began to capture land in countries like France and Belgium. On August 21, 1914, a colossal army of German soldiers marched through the town of Brussels in Belgium. Germany's plan was to catch France off guard by capturing some of its neighboring land, like Belgium, and invading them from there. This was called the Schlieffen Plan, which was meant to take France out of the war quickly. As one witness reported, what came after them, and 24 hours later is still coming, is not men marching, but a force of nature like a tidal wave, an avalanche, or a river flooding its banks. The Schlieffen Plan was working, but through it, Germany did not fully consider the Treaty of London of 1839. This treaty said that Britain had to protect Belgium, for Belgium had many vital ports that they used. Britain did not want to enter the growing conflict at first, but the treaty forced their hand. Once again, entangling alliances were increasing the conflict and making the Great War even greater. As the world now knows, no compromise was sufficient to stop the war from beginning, for the conflicts added up and eventually exploded into what is now known as World War I. After the smoke from the war dissipated, the Allied powers came out on top. These allies pushed Germany out of France's land and forced Germany to surrender. When the conflict finally came to an end, the leaders met to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Through the treaty, Germany had to pay a large amount of money for damage done to land in other countries throughout Europe, which only left the Germans vengeful. This payment greatly crippled their economy and sent many Germans into poverty, so when a new leader, Adolf Hitler, rose up with promises to bring the country back, many Germans were willing to listen. The atrocities that occurred during Hitler's reign, however, would not have happened without the conflict and failed compromises that started World War I. The year of 1914, therefore, was a turning point for the world, as the abundance of conflicts that appeared at the time started to become too much for Europe to handle. The many alliances formed with other countries inflated the conflicts, and those conflicts eventually became the war. In the end, all attempts to form a compromise failed.